We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you. It's Monday, June 15th here in Seoul. I'm Isujin, and this is News Generation. Joining us today is Hyun.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. Also, Brooke is with us.
Hello and happy Pride.
And both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. So we're starting off a brand new work week, and one event from the weekend is still generating plenty of discussion. It brought thousands of people together and sparked conversations both at the venue and beyond. So, how did this year's Seoul Queer Culture Festival go, Hyun?
Firstly, the 27th Seoul Queer Festival, or SQCF, kicked off on June 1st and is running until the 28th in Central Seoul under the theme Intersection Connecting Differences. Now, the main event, which is a Seoul Queer Parade, happened over the weekend, actually, on Saturday the 13th, in the area between Uljido Ilga Station and Jonggak Station. Now, outdoor booths were set up, as you can see on the screen, along with live music, speeches, and public marches to promote LGBTQ+ visibility, human rights, and cultural enjoyment, and of course, pride. The exact number of attendees have not been reported yet, but according to the Seoul Queer Parade Executive Committee, around 17,000 people were expected to participate. Notably, the number has been growing steadily. In 2022, roughly 13,500 people turned up, while in 2024, there were around 15,000, and last year, approximately 17,000 people actually enjoyed the festival, again highlighting the expansion of the public culture event and promoting openness for anyone to attend.
Right, so it seems the event is continuing to grow, both in size and in visibility, reflecting how conversations around diversity and inclusion are becoming part of the mainstream. But at the same time, the event also highlighted the different views that still exist within our society. So what were the main concerns raised by those who were opposing the event, Brooke?
Well, I have been to these events in Seoul many times over the years, and as you can see from the pictures that we showed, it's really a very fun, vibrant, accepting atmosphere, except for one thing, and that would be the opposition rallies that happen around the festivals. They typically have banners, they have megaphones, they do chants, and there's a lot of hateful rhetoric that comes out. And I have to give a lot of credit to the event participants. There were stories this year as well about them walking by the protesters and just giving them a smile, handling it with really a lot of grace. Now, these groups are typically religious or civic groups that say that this festival goes against their personal beliefs and their views of what a family should look like. But others, like myself, believe that it's wrong to protest against someone's very identity and existence, especially when they're just there to celebrate and be happy. But a really positive silver lining is that not all religious groups were doing that. Some religious groups actually set up welcome booths at the festival, and one pastor said that they did that because they wanted to give these minorities a feeling of comfort, that not everyone who is of faith has those feelings against them. And I thought that was quite beautiful. Also, like Ki-hoon mentioned, the slogan of this year's festival was about connecting despite your differences. And so I think that's a really good step to lead us on this discussion today.
So all this shows that while attitudes are evolving, debates over identity, values, and free expression remain complex and also deeply personal for many people. And that's why we're going to talk more about this. But first, let's take a look at the screen. For decades, South Korea has been viewed as a socially conservative society. But attitudes toward gender identity and diversity have been evolving, particularly among younger generations. Now in its 27th year, this Seoul Queer Culture Festival has become one of the country's most visible events advocating for LGBTQ rights. Today on News Generation, we look at how Korean society has changed over the past several decades, how those shifts compare with developments in the United States, and the role millennials and Gen Z are playing in shaping the conversation. Just as we saw in the video, attitudes toward the LGBT community have evolved significantly over time. And to understand where that change began, it's worth looking back at how Korean society has shifted over the past few decades. So how much has our society changed over the years, Kyun?
Before you look at how Koreans' perception towards LGBTQ has changed over time, it's good to have a clear understanding of the term itself. So, sexual minorities is an umbrella term referring to people whose sexual orientation or gender identity places them in a social minority group. Now, in South Korea, the LGBTQ plus community began to gain public visibility in the early 1990s, with the country's first gay rights organization established in 1993. Now, that momentum continued with the inaugural Seoul Queer Parade in 2000. And that same year, a television personality who publicly came out faced intense social backlash, highlighting the challenges LGBTQ plus individuals encountered at the time. But two decades later, the landscape began to shift a lot. In 2022, dating and reality shows such as Marry Queer brought diverse sexual identities and relationships into the mainstream media spotlight. The changes also reflected in public attitudes. If you take a look at the screen, according to a survey by Korea Research, the gap in perceptions regarding the acceptance of homosexuality sexuality narrowed by 9 percentage points in 2025 compared to 2 years ago, 2023, suggesting that more people are getting there, gradually accepting and understanding sexual minorities here in Korea.
So it's interesting to see how visibility and public awareness have expanded alongside broader social discussions. And Korea's experience may be unique, but it's certainly not the only country that has undergone major changes in this area. So what kind of changes have we seen in the US then, Brooke?
Well, it's important to remember that this Pride Festival didn't start as just a festival. It actually came from a point of pain and courage and bravery. So it can be traced back to the Stonewall Uprising in New York in 1969. And this was a rebellion in response to ongoing discrimination and police harassment. So a lot of the progress we see today in terms of gay rights can be credited to the bravery of the people that fought for those rights back then. So looking at the changes that have happened since, in 1973, the American Psychiatric Association removed homosexuality from its list of mental disorders. It's kind of hard to believe that it was ever on there, but thankfully it was removed. And then in 2015, the U.S. Supreme Court actually legalized same-sex marriage nationwide, a big win. Another important milestone happened in 2020 when the Supreme Court ruled that employers cannot discriminate against workers based on their sexual orientation or their gender identity. And this really significantly expanded workplace protections for LGBTQ plus Americans. Unfortunately, however, in recent years, we've started to see things backslide a bit. I was really comforted to hear what Ki-hoon said about the statistics here in Korea, that gap is narrowing, people are becoming more accepting, but I'm afraid the results of surveys in America show the opposite trend. Public acceptance has actually been declining since the 2020s, and so people in the community are very worried that they're going to lose their protections in the coming years. So I think it's important for us to have discussions like these so that we can prevent divisive rhetoric from happening and prevent the spread of hate. We want to spread love here for sure.
Right, and all that timeline shows how social attitudes and also legal recognition often evolve hand in hand. And when we look at those changes, the younger generations frequently emerge as a driving force behind these big changes. So how are millennials and Gen Zs leading the shift?
2022 survey by Gallup Korea found that more than 70% of respondents in their 20s and 30s, the MZ generation, supported the rights of sexual minorities. The survey also showed that over 80% of women in their 20s and 30s said they would be understanding and accepting if a friend or a colleague came out as LGBTQ+. However, support levels were relatively lower among male respondents, highlighting a noticeable gap in attitudes, gender gap in attitudes. While acceptance of LGBTQ rights has generally increased, differences in perception remain. So debates continue over the style and expression events such as these, the queer pride parades, where some argue that certain forms of public expression can be a little too excessive. So basically, attitudes toward LGBTQ issues in South Korea, it is definitely getting better, as in people are more accepting and understanding, and the gap is narrowing. But if we look at it a bit more closely in detail, there is a stark, difference in gender in terms of like women are a bit more, I guess, understanding and open, whereas male are a bit more, I guess, not there yet, but they're slowly getting there.
I wonder why there's a big difference, because with women you said 80%. That's like a huge gap.
I have no idea, but you know, I'm quite open to you know, I'm very understanding and accepting. But I think it's a cultural thing as well, how men are just brought up in Korea from the past, and I guess you know they need to, for once, for now, probably learn from women having a bit more open minds. So
True.
I think it was
Well, you're a
something
good
we can
example as well.
learn. Yeah, I guess.
So it's not just genders. The numbers also suggest a generational difference, but continue to play a major role in shaping public opinion. And a similar pattern can be seen in the US, where younger people are redefining how identity is understood and expressed. So we talk about young Koreans, but how are younger Americans influencing the conversation these days?
Well, it's true that younger people are also more open about these topics, I would say. According to a 2023 survey in the US, Gen Z was significantly more likely than older generations to identify as LGBTQ+. And there was even a term that's now being discussed in popular culture called bisexual chic. This is actually the first time I have heard this term. It basically means that some people these days find bisexuality in particular to be cool or trendy, but I would warn against using this term because it seems to me a little bit derogatory towards actual bisexual people by implying that they're perhaps only identifying that way for a fad. As you can see on screen here, however, 72% of people that are Gen Z do say that they identify as heterosexual, but 28% say that they identify as a part of this community that we're talking about today, and this is in stark contrast to baby boomers and millennials as well. So overall, I think younger people seem more comfortable viewing identity and attraction as more of a spectrum, and they're not so much about the strictly defined categories. And experts point to several reasons for this trend. They say that, you know, people in these days, they watch a lot of streaming content, they are exposed to a lot of global content, so they see more representation than before. They also grew up in a time of big social movements like Black Lives Matter and Me Too. So they've always been encouraged to kind of participate in these social discussions. And I think that's also encouraged them to be more likely to explore their own identities.
Right. So this highlights how social media, global connectivity, and changing cultural norms are creating new ways for people to think about identity. At the same time, the conversation continues to evolve, raising broader questions about diversity, inclusion, and how societies are adapting to change. So to get a more personal and in-depth perspective on this, we're going to talk to someone who is part of the LGBTQ community here in Korea. And that conversation will take place right after the break, so don't go anywhere.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search out Channel Arirang News. Click Posts and cast your vote in the poll. Make a new type of news with us.
Joining us now is Kim Chul-soon, an LGBTQ content creator who discusses issues related to identity, representation, and everyday life on his social media platform. So hello, thank you so much for connecting with us today. Hi, so what are your thoughts on Korea's culture festivals, and what was your personal experience like attending it?
I think the Quiorparade is a festival in itself. It is a festival where everyone, whether they are part of the community or not, can just enjoy it together as human beings. As a queer person and a YouTuber, I have attended it a few times. I remember it was a really hot summer day. There were so many people that it was hard to even walk around. The first time I went, I was amazed and deeply moved to see so many people like me. However, across the street, people who call themselves Christian were blasting loudspeakers to ruin the festival. They were shouting loudly through megaphones on the banners filled with hate speech. It was a really unpleasant sight. I don't know if it was to fight back against that hate but I remember our speakers being much bigger and louder than theirs. Anyway, I hope the Queer Parade continue to develop into a great festival for everyone there, not just for us.
Thank you for that response. My next question to you is, how have attitudes toward the LGBTQ community changed over time, both online and offline?
Yes, I definitely feel the change. I think YouTube opened the door. And I am a YouTuber myself. When I first revealed myself on YouTube and started making videos, there were very few queer channels. That's why my Korean queer friends call me the first generation. But now there are so many of them. Also, as we appear on Korean TV and OTT platform, we are naturally becoming closer to the public. But this is only looking at the good side. Korean society still lacks a legal system to protect sexual minority. That's why many people still openly use hate speech and act rudely. In that sense, it feels like a very confusing time for queer people in Korea right now.
Well, good morning to you and your adorable cat. Thank you for joining us and for sharing your experiences with us. My last question for you is, what progress would you like to see society make regarding LGBTQ rights?
I've said this so many times that it might sound cliche, but the answer is the legal recognition of same-sex marriage. Along with that, we need broad sex education for teenagers. And as I mentioned earlier, we need an anti-discrimination law to stop rude and ignorant people from disrupting the festival. They call it freedom of speech, but that's not freedom of speech. It's freedom to hate. No religion teaches hate, right? Getting our basic right recognized under law as equal citizens is a powerful and common sense tool. It will teach people to see us not as second-class citizens, but as equal human beings.
All right, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
We just spoke with our Zoom guest about his experiences and his perspective on Korea's queer culture festivals and the changes he's observed in society over the years. And turning back to our panelists, compared to the past, do you personally feel attitudes toward LGBTQ people have changed, King?
Well, I grew up in Sydney where a big event, annual event called the Sydney Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras is held like every year. And it was actually on TV as well. It's on TV, like news every year. And I remember seeing the Korean celebrity actually parading, and I thought, oh, why is he there? And then that's when I kind of understood about the whole community, because I was very young, I didn't really know. It came across to me as very new and unique, and I guess perhaps a little difficult to understand at first, but then because I was exposed to that community where I lived, it became quite natural, and it became just understanding. And so when I came to Korea, after I came to Korea, I was in the model industry for a few years, and you know, in that industry, you get to meet a lot of people in the social minority group, and because of what I saw growing up, I was, you know, very, very neutral about how I responded to them and how I acted towards them. And my Korean friends were actually shocked to see how I was actually, you know, getting along with them. And I said, hey, you know, we're all the same, but we may view them in a different way, but from their perspective, they probably see us in the same light as well, being different. And like, you know, it's all about connecting the differences and accepting that difference. So for me, you know, I'm very cool with who I meet, regardless of their, you know, sexual perceptions. And I think at the end of the day, we're all humans, and as long as we're happy, that's fine. And the most important part is if they don't harm us, we shouldn't harm them.
True.
And that's
True.
the way I put it, yeah.
I think exposure is also a big reason why people are less familiar
That's right as well, yeah.
with that community in Korea. Because I remember growing up and seeing only that one Korean celebrity. But yeah, so I feel like it is changing. So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, when I was growing up in the US, I had a lot of people around me that were in that community, but I don't think it was spoken about as openly or freely as it is now. I think a lot of that has to do with social media and the internet. When I was growing up, we had maybe MySpace. It's not like we were scrolling all day long and being able to see all of this content from other people like us that, you know, we could relate to. I think these days people in this community, they have more representation in media. They can see more love stories that look like theirs. And so I think that's a great thing, and young people are a lot more likely now to explore and to talk about what's going on with their feelings. Of course, unfortunately, this doesn't mean that everyone is going to agree or be kind about it, but I really just hope that we can continue to progress forward and see more productive conversations, people coexisting in peace.
Right, so change rarely happens in a straight line. So to wrap up our discussion today, how can societies then navigate all these different views while also moving forward and making progress, Kyun?
Perhaps like the most important part is actually trying to narrow the gap and having different kind of perceptions towards the LGBTQ community. And like how our guest said, look, we all have freedom of speech, but it's not freedom of hate. You know, a lot of people are just lashing out at them, making hateful comments that can be very hurtful. So I think, look, anywhere we go, we're going to have like extremes. That's just part of life. That's part of society. But for those who are in the middle, can be a bit more supportive and raise their voices and say, hey, you know, let's be a bit more understanding, because everyone's different. And if we don't accept that, I mean, moving forward, we're going to have so much clashes, even more. But then we're already living in a life where high inflation, everything's so expensive. It's very difficult to live a happy life. So having these kind of like, I guess I think it's a minor conflict. Getting rid of that, thinking about what really matters, what makes us happy, what makes just be ourselves, and I think, and respecting others, and keeping these three things in mind, I think, you know, everything's going to be a bit better if we don't really think about why we hate each other. You know, just think about why we
things to love about each other.
Think more about things about what we can love each other for about. So I think, yeah, it's a difficult topic to talk about on air. But then I think after hearing from our guest, you know, I've gained a deeper understanding of different people and trying to be a bit more accepting and not raising my voice. If I'm not going to say anything nice, it's just it's better to keep it silent.
Good rule of thumb. And I think a lot of the misunderstandings that come is because of just ignorance and just getting to know them at realizing they're not that much different than us will go a long way. So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, just very quickly, I think going back to the core concept of the Seoul Queer Culture Festival that we saw this weekend, it's all about connecting despite your differences. So don't draw a line between each other just because you have a difference in identity, opinion, belief. Try to see where the other person is coming from. Try to promote acceptance and love. During this time that is so polarized with people so strongly disagreeing with each other, I would just love to see, you know, more love. And at the end of the day, we all just want to enjoy the very short time that we have on this planet. So let's all do it with love, not hate or judgment.
Right, so whether we're viewing this through the lens of rights, culture, or generational change, there's no denying that attitudes toward LGBTQ communities have evolved significantly. While greater visibility and acceptance have emerged in many parts of society, differing views continue to shape the debate. And the challenge going forward may be finding ways to bridge those differences while also continuing the conversation. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of News Generation. But News Gen will be back tomorrow at 10:30 in Korea time with more stories and discussions. Big thanks to Kyun.
It's always a pleasure.
And also Brooke.
Thank you for having me.
And to our viewers, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully this is a week where you can see more rainbow flags and red flags. We are News Generation.